Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/Brian E. Denton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is from chapter 293. Chapter 293. From the time he received this news to the end of the campaign, all Kutuzov's activity was directed towards restraining his troops, by authority, by guile, and by entreaty, from useless attacks, maneuvers, or encounters with the perishing enemy. Dokhturov went to Malo-Yaroslavets, but Kutuzov lingered with the main army and gave orders for the evacuation of Kaluga, a retreat beyond which town seemed to him quite possible. Everywhere Kutuzov retreated, but the enemy, without waiting for his retreat, fled in the opposite direction. Napoleon's historians describe to us his skilled maneuvers at Tarutino and Malo-Yaroslavets, and make conjectures as to what would have happened had Napoleon been in time to penetrate into the rich southern provinces. But not to speak of the fact that nothing prevented him from advancing into those southern provinces, for the Russian army did not bar his way, the historians forget that nothing could have saved his army, for then already it bore within itself the germs of inevitable ruin. How could that army, which had found abundant supplies in Moscow and had trampled them underfoot instead of keeping them, and on arriving at Smolensk had looted provisions instead of storing them, how could that army recuperate in Kaluga province, which was inhabited by Russians such as those who lived in Moscow, and where fire had the same property of consuming what was set ablaze? That army could not recover anywhere. Since the Battle of Borodino and the pillage of Moscow, it had been born within itself, as it were, the chemical elements of dissolution. The members of what had once been an army, Napoleon himself and all his soldiers fled, without knowing whither, each concerned only to make his escape as quickly as possible from this position, of the hopelessness of which they were all more or less vaguely conscious. So it came about that at the Council of Malo-Yaroslavets, when the generals pretending to confer together expressed various opinions, all mouths were closed by the opinion uttered by the simple-minded soldier Mouton, who, speaking last, said what they all felt: that the one thing needful was to get away as quickly as possible, and no one, not even Napoleon, could say anything against that truth, which they all recognized. But, though they all realized that it was necessary to get away, there still remained a feeling of shame at admitting that they must flee. An external shock was needed to overcome that shame, and this shock came in due time. It was what the French called l'horreur de l'empereur. The day after the council, at Malo-Yaroslavets, Napoleon rode out early in the morning amid the lines of his army, with his suite of marshals and an escort, on the pretext of inspecting the army and the scenes of the previous and of the impending battle. Some Cossacks on the prowl for booty fell in with the emperor and very nearly captured him. If the Cossacks did not capture Napoleon then, what saved him was the very thing that was destroying the French army, the booty on which the Cossacks fell. Here, as at Tarutino, they went after plunder, leaving the men. Disregarding Napoleon, they rushed after the plunder, and Napoleon managed to escape. When les enfants du Don might so easily have taken the emperor himself in the midst of his army, it was clear that there was nothing for it but to fly as fast as possible along the nearest familiar road. Napoleon, with his 40-year-old stomach, understood that hint, Not feeling his former agility and boldness, and under the influence of the fright the Cossacks had given him, he at once agreed with Mouton and issued orders, as the historians tell us, to retreat by the Smolensk road. That Napoleon agreed with Mouton, and that the army retreated, does not prove that Napoleon caused it to retreat, but that the forces which influenced the whole army and directed it along the Mozhask, that is, the Smolensk road, acted simultaneously on him also. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 293. I will now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 293. Revenge. This is the most thoughtless entry of A Year of War and Peace that you will read. I do not endorse the barbarous and violent nature of its concluding meditation. It's just an occasion to share a pretty badass Seneca quote I've always enjoyed. Today's reading offers just the perfect opportunity to do so. We have a short chapter today, just under 2 pages. We start with more of Kutuzov's famous patience, and we conclude with more of Napoleon's active, reactionary approach to warfare. We know which method ultimately proves victorious: Kutuzov's cold dish rather than Napoleon's fast food. There is a lesson here for those who would take their revenge, though, let me say, I remain devoted to the more virtuous approach of Marcus Aurelius we meditated on way back on day 253. Daily Meditation. One who endures deep wounds mutely, with cool patience, can repay them. Anger concealed wreaks havoc. Hatred declared loses its chance for revenge. Seneca, Medea. All right, so that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 293 of War and Peace. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation at PayPal. The links to all that are down below. Your support is greatly appreciated. You'll also find down in the show notes in the description links to my Amazon wish list for books and movies. If you get me one or both of those, we'll set up a Zoom call to talk to each other. I look forward to doing that. Your support in any event is greatly appreciated. Tomorrow we're going to be reading chapter 294. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.